It's time for more Steam Deck coverage with a game that is much less action-packed than pretty much everything else we've covered on here. Something nice, calm, and very passive in nature. One of the best and staple simulators for truck driving right along with its European sibling ETS. So, let's see how the Steam Deck can handle American Truck Simulator, otherwise known as ATS. To briefly summarize, American Truck Simulator is a truck driving sim where you drive a semi around large open world recreations of parts of the United States, picking up and delivering loads, managing traffic law under the threat of being fined and ticketed, managing your fatigue and fuel by stopping to rest, using way stations, and a bunch of other in-depth things that truck drivers have to deal with on a daily basis. It's also a game very heavy on mods through Steam Workshop. There are hundreds of pages of modifications available, enhancing the game with money multipliers, smarter AI, adding in trucks that aren't in the base game, paint jobs, skins, and my personal favorite, turning all of the bland and generic companies in the game's world into real-world ones, letting you do deliveries for the likes of Walmart, Target, or UPS, and refuel at BP and TA truck stops instead of generic company and generic gas station. Now, before we go into performance, let's talk about the real problem with making ATS a bit janky on the Steam Deck and really any sort of controller or gamepad. There are lots of things you can do in this game, not just driving, but turn signals, lights, wipers, GPS controls, handbrake, coupling to trailers, camera angles, and the list goes on. Quite frankly, you can't use a controller and do everything this game can do. Gamepads simply don't have enough buttons for how many functions ATS has. So what you'll need to do here from time to time is hold down the Steam key and X to bring up the onboard keyboard for some of the other controls. I do this for things like wiper blades and headlights, since the normal gamepad control scheme already gives you most of the essentials for playing the game. But let's get into graphics and performance. The first thing you need to do is turn on Proton. If you recall, my initial speed testing of this game, which was solely Linux based, came out with about 45 to 60 FPS, all the way down on medium graphics settings. But with Proton on, be it 7, 8, or experimental, we can get that kind of level on maximum settings. And as we get ready to talk about that, it is worth noting that first person or cockpit view will get noticeably lower frames per second as opposed to third person view on the higher graphical options. But speaking of, if you run this game on Ultra, the wilderness areas on highways between cities will net you a nice and smooth 60 frames per second, dropping down into the 50s every once in a while, but not really that often. It's more when you get to the cities with more buildings and heavier traffic that the drops happen. And the drops will vary. Some areas will have it drop into the 50s, but others can drop it into the 40s as well. It's not terrible. The lowest FPS I got on Ultra was 38 FPS for a second or two, and it popped right back up to around 43. Now, what we want to do from here is avoid going down to medium. In my opinion, that is the point where the visuals start to get a bit muddy and really jaggy off in the distance. You will get a constant 60 FPS on medium, but I personally prefer to have the game looking a little bit better. My recommendation is running the game on high settings. Many of those 50 FPS areas on Ultra will be 60 on medium, though the drops into the 50s will still happen from time to time. If you want consistency here, you'll need to go to the Steam Deck settings and lock it down to 40 Hz and 40 FPS. Granted, you can just drop it down to medium for that 60 FPS, but that's really up to you. I like this game looking better so I can see and read all of the modded trailers and paint jobs. And with all this in mind, I think it's still a pretty good turnout. You can use Ultra settings with keeping it above 30 FPS, high to keep it above 40, and medium low to keep it at 60. It may not be perfect, especially for a game from 2016, but it's pretty good. Finally, we have battery life, which isn't as high as I was expecting. If you run high brightness, you'll get about 2 hours out of ATS, while lower brightness will bump that up to about 2.5 hours. Much more battery taxing than I expected it to be. But let's wrap this up. Would I recommend American Truck Simulator to Steam Deck users? I would say yes, but with a bit of warning to the hardcore truckers out there that play this game on their laptops and want the deck. It plays great even with a bunch of mods turned on, but just note that some features you will have to pull the keyboard up for. But honestly, that's really a small detail. Overall, ATS is great on the deck and people wanting it on the go will find a nice experience. And that's all I've got for you today. I'll be back soon with more Steam Deck coverage and reviews. As always, thank you for watching and have a great day.